They say AMC suspended a heater core in the air and built the XJ around it. To replace the heater core, the entire dashboard needs to come out, the steering column, the center console, all of it. Surprisingly, you don't need many tools to do that. As usual, we'll be doing everything without power tools. All you see here is all you need. Sockets from 8 to 13 millimeter, a 10, 11, and 13 deep socket. You'll also need a couple various extensions. A swivel joint might be helpful, a mini ratchet for the HVAC box itself, and importantly, an 11 millimeter ratcheting swivel wrench. If you don't have one of these, that's the one tool you absolutely need for this job. We'll need a 3/4 and a 5/8 quick disconnect tool. Everybody online swears by these metal ones, but I've never had any luck with them. The plastic ones work better for me, so I don't know. Might need some pliers, some priers, a razor blade, and of course, a good old Phillips screwdriver. You're gonna need a little bit of engine coolant. This is literally all I used, and this is like a worst case scenario because I dumped out a whole bunch I didn't need to. Heater cores can fail in two ways. They can leak just like radiators, which will leave the passenger side footwell drenched in engine coolant, or they can get clogged, which diminishes their effectiveness. Because the previous owners of my Jeep used stop leak to fix a cracked cylinder head, my heater core is completely clogged and therefore completely useless. You can flush the heater core by forcing water through it, which might help prolong its life, but with 330,000 miles on the original unit, it's time for a replacement. When you replace the heater core, you should also replace the evaporator for the air conditioner, which requires the same amount of effort to get to. Now, I've actually deleted the AC on this Jeep, but I'm going to replace the evaporator anyway just to demonstrate how that's done. You also might need a new set of HVAC box foam, but everything else related to the system can be replaced without removing the whole dashboard. The blower motor, the resistor, and the blend door actuator can all be replaced easily later on if you end up having issues with them. Stage 1 is preparation. The first thing you do before even thinking about working on an air conditioning system is to have it professionally emptied and the Freon recycled. There do exist tools to do this yourself, but I decided to have a shop diagnose which component of my AC system was leaking. That ended up being the evaporator core inside the dash, of course, so that's when I just ripped everything out. The second thing you do before even thinking about working on a car's heater is to, of course, let the engine cool all the way down. Once that's done, or perhaps as that's happening, let's get some penetrating fluid on the 5 studs mounting the HVAC box to the firewall. There are 2 nuts that also mount the AC accumulator. There's one hidden in this very back corner next to the blower motor, and finally there's 2 behind the engine, this upper one buried behind all these vacuum and brake lines, and the lower one directly behind the cylinder head. You need to spray all of these with PB before you start, otherwise the studs will just unscrew themselves from the plastic HVAC box. On the inside, make sure to move your seats all the way back, there's no reason to remove them, and turn the steering wheel 180 degrees to the left. This will make it much easier to disconnect the steering shaft later on. You'll also want to chock the wheels because we will be manipulating the shifter levers. Stage 2 I call the exoskeleton. We need to remove pretty much every last plastic trim piece inside. Let's start with the kick panels. There are 2 screws along the door opening trim and one 11mm nut way in the back. Let's do the same thing on the opposite side. Pop the fuse panel cover off to find another fake nut here. The glove box has 3 screws along the bottom, and then just open the latch to remove it. Same deal on the driver's side for the knee blocker trim, 3 hex screws, and it unclips. Behind the plastic is the metal knee blocker. This just has 2 hex screws and pivots downwards. Next, I'll tackle the center console, remove the shift knob, which on automatics is done by just yanking up on it really hard. Get the shift boot or bezel out, and the 4-wheel drive bezel, even if yours is 2-wheel drive, because there's a screw under both of these that mount the console. There are 2 more hex screws on the bottom of the storage bin, and then you pull the handbrake all the way up, move the shift levers as needed, and you can raise the console out of here. Then remove the rear heater vent tube. The radio bezel just clips in. Behind that are 4 screws securing the cluster trim. Detach this rubber loop from itself, and then that whole piece comes forward and out. You have to cram the headlight switch through it. I also had to unplug some custom switches I have mounted. The top dashboard trim just has clips. Be careful not to break it at this seam here. Once it's unclipped, it comes forward and out. It's at this point on 97 and 98, you're going to remove the HVAC control panel here, but on 99 to 01, this can just stay in place. On 99 to 01, this knob controls the blend door electronically, so you don't need to touch this panel at all. On 97 and 98, we'll remove the 4 screws around it. You can also take off the switch panel right below it to get some more room, because we need to detach this cable. I'm going to stick a screwdriver behind this ledge right here, and there's a tab we need to press towards the center of the control panel. And then the cable just slides right out of there, and then you just move it sideways and lift it out of that slot. There we go. You can then disconnect the vacuum harness for that control panel here, the green connector, and buried somewhere around this area, the radio antenna as well. You can disconnect the battery at any point before all that, but this is your final call for doing so, because stage 3 is the steering column, which involves the airbag. We're going to be removing the whole thing, which you don't need to do. I'm sure you've seen videos where people just let it rest on the seat, hold the dash out with a bungee cord, and try to cram themselves between it and the firewall, getting the HVAC stuff out. But leaving the dash in like this only saves you from removing 4 bolts. Let me clarify, it only takes 4 additional bolts to get the entire thing out of here to open up all the space you could ever need. And leaving the dash in requires you to completely unbolt the steering column anyway, just leaving it connected to the intermediate shaft. So for the trade-off of, like I said, 4 additional bolts, let's just get it all out of the way and perform the job correctly as outlined in section 24, page 37 of the factory service manual. On a 97, to get this plastic trim off, you actually need to take out the ignition cylinder because it has this little plastic ring around it. If you have a 97, you know what I'm talking about. So there's a little hole right here. You take a stick, put it up in that hole, and there's a button. And you press that button, and with the key in the run position, when you take it out, it will take the whole ignition cylinder with it. Now, I can't actually do that on mine because my ignition cylinder is very worn out because so many people have ripped the key out without pressing the little steering wheel lock release because it's a factory manual, because nobody knows that exists. On 98 Plus, though, you can leave the ignition cylinder in there. Just remove the 3 screws from the underside. This plastic case separates, revealing the connectors for the ignition switch, cruise control, horn, and airbag. And then on the top half, we got the wiper controls and 2 connectors for the multifunction switch. Automatics are going to have this little lockout cable for the shifter. You can also unplug the yellow airbag connector here and detach the brake light switch by twisting it to the left. There are 4 nuts that secure the steering column. They're all 13mm and they're all on these really long studs, so you'll need a deep socket. But before that, if you turned the steering column 180 degrees before we started, it will have rotated this bolt right here on the shaft downwards so that we can reach it with an extension instead of it pointing upwards where there's no room to even loosen that. So loosen and remove that bolt from the steering shaft. And then using a pry bar of some kind, get the shaft off the column. At this point, you'll need to take extra care not to spin the steering wheel at all, and remove the 4 nuts holding it in. If you have a tilt wheel, make sure you raise it to the highest position before getting it out. That'll make it go back in easier. I managed to get my steering wheel to lock where it was, so if you can do that, it'll ensure it won't spin. But again, you need to make sure it doesn't, because that's how you destroy clock springs. Next, we're going to tackle these 3 bolted connectors. You want to make extra sure your battery is not connected for this part. There's a 10mm bolt on each one, and they unscrew a lot farther than you might think.
This connector hits the clutch pedal, so it'll hold the clutch pedal in while I rip that out of there.
Now we're ready to remove the entire dashboard. It's secured with 6 bolts along the top, 1 in each lower corner, and this bracket in the center with 4 13mm bolts. A swivel joint extension helps reach this one. Get that bracket out of here, and then locate the lower corner bolts and loosen but do not remove them. These can be rusty, so PB them if you have to, but be extra careful not to break them, because not only do they mount the dash, they're also the grounding points for everything electronic in it. Just back them both out about 3/4 of an inch, and you can see the metal bracket behind them will just slide out. Across the top you'll find 6 10mm bolts. Using a long extension and a deep socket, I removed those, and be careful not to swing the ratchet into the windshield. You might notice my windshield is cracked. I got an appointment to get that fixed, don't worry, but it'd be a shame to break a good one. Now the dashboard is ready to be removed. Pull it upwards and away from the firewall to unhook the center studs at the top. And ideally, with the help of a second person, you can maneuver this behemoth out the driver's side door. I'll just set it on this camping chair. Be careful with this thing, and make sure you don't set it on something crucial like those bolted connectors, the switch panel in the middle, or the footwell lights. Congratulations, you've made it this far, but the fun has only just begun. Now we can remove the HVAC box. First, get this green connector out of this plastic cover, which should be removed at this time with 4 8mm bolts.
Well, I guess that works.
You'll want to verify none of these unrelated wires or connectors are going to get stuck on anything, and then head over to the engine bay side, because we have entered stage 5. The first order of business is to unplug the heater hoses, which I've already done, so here's footage of James doing exactly that. The second order of business is to disconnect the air conditioning lines, and simultaneously remove the accumulator here, also called the drier. To get some more space, I'll unplug the vacuum lines from the evap purge valve and remove that by just pulling it upwards. Carefully disconnect the vacuum line here. This one is going to be very brittle because of all the engine bay heat. And now with these safety locks off, we can put a quick disconnect tool on the AC lines. This is kind of a chaotic operation. On 2000 and older years, this line from the dryer to the evaporator is actually just one integrated piece with the dryer. So to disconnect it, you also take out the dryer, and to do that, you got to unbolt 2 of the 11mm HVAC box studs we sprayed with PB earlier. On late model 2000s and 01s, this line is a separate piece that can be unbolted from the dryer. So I tried that, and with some fondling, was able to get it out. I'll have to reuse this line with a new dryer, but I'm going to worry about that later. I still have to get it and its bracket out of here, which again is held in by these 2 studs. On 97s, you're going to have to remove the charcoal canister, this black cylinder thing right here. It's got 3 8mm self-tapping screws that secure its bracket to the frame rail way down there. I reached it with like 3 feet of extensions. And then there's 2 vacuum lines on the top of it that just pop off. With the evap canister out of the way, an 11mm deep socket will nicely remove these 2 nuts. Then we can get the dryer and its bracket out of the way, and when you open one of these, you do kind of have to replace it because it just gets soaked with moisture when it's exposed to the outside air for too long. Also remember to pop off the little rubber drain tube for the evaporator way at the bottom here. This will get stuck. Now, on California emissions-equipped models, including but not limited to 2001s, we'll need to get the evap leak detection pump out of the engine bay to access another stud. We'll unplug the connector for it, pop the vacuum supply off the back, and locate 3 10mm bolts holding it in. I have repurposed one of those bolts for these custom hood struts. That video is linked in the description, so I'm hoping I won't have to remove the strut to get this thing out of here. And if your Jeep doesn't have this, don't worry, it was only included on XJs with the low emissions package from 1998 to 2001. Now that it's out of the way, we can find this one nut back here that needs to be removed. You can't access it with a deep socket. This is where our swivel head 11mm ratcheting wrench comes into play. This thing is a game changer, and conveniently, the CPS bolts are the same size, so you can use it for that too. Now I'll use a deep socket and a swivel joint extension to remove the nut behind these vacuum lines here, and that just leaves nut number 5. We've got the evap test line mounted to it on 99 Plus models, so pry that off. That'd be this line here, and regardless of California emission status, that line is always there, just capped off on the models that don't use it.
Alright, I'm going in. Okay. Down, and I put it on the wrong way. Okay. Yeah, there's room. Well, hey, there's a good view of the coil rail connector. Shit. Yeah, there's room back there, just barely.
If any of these nuts are fused to the studs and don't want to come out, you can unscrew the whole thing from the plastic. They do have hex heads on the back, and maybe use some anti-seize putting it back together. Anyway, the HVAC box is now ready to be removed. As you do so, try not to tilt it forwards because the heater core is going to have some coolant in it. Alright, it's a very unusual view for the XJ. Here's what all this nonsense looks like. Should we take the under carpet gamble? How much rust are we gonna have? Or are we gonna win big? I'm rich! Oh my god, that's like $1 worth of change right there. Holy shit. Uh-oh. $1.09. Anyway, back to the task at hand. Welcome to Stage 6. This is the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning box on the 1997 to 2001 Jeep Cherokee. First thing we need to do is get these foam seals off of here because the box separates in a top and bottom half, and these seals are obviously one piece. Now, you got to do this very carefully because in a lot of cases you're going to have to reuse these, and they're like taped on there, so you got to very carefully peel them off. And you can see this one is just crumbling and tearing anyway. So it's a real shame nobody makes these seals anymore, and there's nowhere you can get them brand new. Don't worry, boys. I got you hooked up. Linked in the description. I don't know why this little bracket here exists on the AC lines. I don't know what the point of that is. But get that off of there, and then we do still have to tear this foam stuff off. I'm just going to break it because I have a new one. And then the vacuum line goes through it too, so just careful not to break that vacuum line. The foam was hard to track down, but after a wild goose chase, I got the factory part number and searched that online to find an eBay listing of someone thankfully reproducing these. At my local Jeep dealer, I asked the parts guy where I could find a factory kit, and he gave me 2 post-it notes, a dealer in Miami, Florida, and one in Pelham, Georgia. I said, what, so are these the only 2 left in the world? And he was like, yep. So I called the Miami dealership, and they told me to piss off and die. Then I called the Georgia dealership, and they looked but couldn't find it. I thought it'd be really cool to get my hands on the last ever new old stock HVAC box foam, and as far as I know, there is only one left in the world at Rob Lambden's University Dodge Ram in Davie, Florida. So you can try calling them if you want, but I talked to 3 different people there, and all of them were extremely rude and didn't want anything to do with me. Alright, spent some time with a razor blade, went around here, got all the adhesive and the foam stuff off. I didn't bother with this seal. I mean, nothing ever goes bad with that one. I might worry about it later. But you want to fully inspect the HVAC box. Mine has a hole right here. Only person who's ever complained about that is Expo. You can see they had a piece of duct tape there, but cold air will just billow out of that hole because it's right under the blower motor. So, I don't know, technically the only way I can reasonably fix that is with a junkyard HVAC box. I don't think I'm going to worry about that. I'll probably just patch it from the inside with like Flex Seal or something, I don't know. Otherwise, here on the bottom is the blend door actuator. So this is electronic on 99 to 01. Otherwise, 97 and 98 will have a cable coming off of that. And that's about all that's going on the underside. This, I believe, is the original HVAC box. Like, nobody's messed with this. This is a copper heater core, and it's bolted in place, which tells me that's most likely factory, as is this thing, which is leaking. The first thing we need to do to get the halves separated is take out the blower motor. So there's a plug for it right here. There's no tab or anything, it just sits in there. I'll put that over there, and then there's 3 8mm bolts, and all of the bolts on this thing, as a matter of fact, are 8mm. Okay, with those 3 out, this is your blower motor right here. Little hamster wheel style fan. And mine does make weird noises when it's cold, so I might replace that.
Shut the f*** up, you entitled brat. That's what I thought.
You can do that with this all installed, though. That hole in the engine bay where this mounts through, you can replace the blower motor with everything installed. You don't need to get this all out. So for now, I'm just going to put this old one back in and reuse it. Through the blower motor hole, we can see this weird silver cage thing. That is the blower motor resistor. That's what changes the speed of the fan, depending on what you have the dial set to in the cab. It's a resistor, so it transforms electrical energy into heat. And the more, the more resistance it adds, the slower the fan spins because the fan is getting less electricity. So because this thing gets really hot, they put it directly next to the blower motor. This is the opposite corner of the box. One thing you want to do is go through here and, gently test all the doors on it, make sure they all work. This is your main vents right here. This is the defroster vents, and then there's one at the bottom here for the floor vents. Just move all of the levers, make sure all the doors properly actuate. I've seen one of these broken before. I don't know what to do about that other than, again, just get a junkyard HVAC box, but it is worth noting that when the entire system doesn't have vacuum, the defrost door is open by default. The yellow line needs vacuum to disable the defroster. And then when the red line gets vacuum, it enables the face level vents, the main vents. This is why you can't use the defroster and the main vents at the same time, because these doors intersect with each other, so they can't both be open. Next, we're going to come over to this corner here, and tilting the box this way will dump coolant and refrigerant out of the cores, so just be aware of that. We'll go ahead and get this little cover off of here. I mean, a lot of Jeeps I've seen don't even have this anymore. Like, it's just been broken and people just throw them away. I think mine is actually broken too, yeah. Yeah, mine's missing this corner piece here. There should be another bolt right there, right where that hole is. So somebody must have kicked it in the past and broke the plastic off. This is also where your recirculation vent is. So when you put the air conditioner on recirculate, it opens this door and it sucks air in from the passenger footwell to recirculate in the cab. it also closes off the outside air intake up here. So this door kind of does two things at once. This is where your blower motor resistor is. We do actually want to unplug this green vacuum line here because the vacuum harness stays with the top of the box and the wire harness stays with the bottom. Be very careful when you're doing that because we don't want even more holes in this. I mean, technically these can stay on if you don't want to risk breaking them. There we go. 2 clips on that one. So we're going to put the wires on the bottom here. Okay, now we're going to begin separating the 2 halves of the box. So I always like to start with these 2 clips right here. They always go flying. Try not to lose them. But this way we know where we started. We're going to work our way around the box and come back here. The brown vacuum line goes to the floor vent control. We're going to have to unplug that. Our first 8mm bolt is right here. There's another one inside here. Number 3 is all the way down here. Number 4, right on the opposite side of the front door. And number 5. Number 6. Number 7 and 8. Number 9 and 10. 11 is right on this corner. And 12 is in this cavity right here. 13 is right behind the flange. And this bolt does not hold the cap on. It actually mounts the heater core. So we're going to have to remove that to get the cap off. And we will not be reinstalling this bolt. So at the end we should have 1 left over because there's absolutely no reason the pipes for the heater core need to be mounted right there. And I've actually seen before people who are doing this with power tools, of course, actually just put the screw in and it drilled right through this copper pipe. They put everything back together, and then of course the heater core was still leaking. They had to do everything all over again and found out that screw was the problem. So I don't even risk that. We're just not even going to put that screw back in. Okay, now I believe we are ready to lift the top off of it. If I didn't miss any bolts. There we go. Yeah, so they got some sort of factory sealer on it that's all tacky and sticky. There we go. Okay. So here's your heater core. Now I see some wetness in there. And then here's your evaporator core for the air conditioner. And some of you may have sometimes noticed this weird sort of material coming out of the vents. That'd be from the evaporator core. That's Jeep's pathetic excuse of a cabin air filter. It just it covers the evaporator. It's like a mesh. So that's all that stuff was. It's a pretty clever design. So this is where the blower motor sits. Air comes in from the top right here. It's sucked through this hole and is blown sideways through the evaporator core. Now you'll notice that all of the air always goes through the evaporator. So when you're not using the AC, this thing isn't any different temperature than the outside air. So air just goes through it. When you are using the AC, air going through this becomes very cold. We then reach the blend door, which on the older ones you can just manually actuate this, but because of the electronic thing on the bottom, I don't want to turn it at all. But air either goes just right this way into the vents, stuff over here. Otherwise, when you turn on the heater, it moves this door, and air instead goes this way up into the heater core, and it actually only comes out of this relatively small cavity right here. And this way, when you're running the defroster in the winter, it does actually turn on the air conditioner, and that gets moisture out of the air, so it blows through the AC and the heater core, and it helps keep the windshield defrosted. These things just sit in here after, of course, you get the one mounting bolt out. The heater core just rises up and out, and this thing is very factory looking. Oh shit, it broke. We got some corrosion. It's definitely leaking. You can see this is wet, just barely. Like this is just starting to leak. We got some cabin air filter mesh crammed in there, and it is otherwise completely clogged. And over here we got the evaporator. So you got this little rubber thing that pivots. Try not to break that. And then this just comes right out of here. And there's a little styrofoam thing on the bottom that you got to be really careful with. Really careful. All sorts of leaves and shit in there. We do need to reuse this styrofoam thing. And it is, of course, styrofoam. So it's very easy to destroy it. There we go. So we can clean that out a bit. It's just really to direct condensation into the evaporator drain, which was that rubber tube we took off of the front of the HVAC box earlier. Otherwise, this is what your evaporator core looks like. And this is also factory original right here. Unless it's not. Is that a junkyard part? Did somebody actually take this out of a junkyard? That would explain why it's leaking. Alright, I've taken this thing outside. I'm going to clean it out a little bit. Before I do that, I wanted to show you a couple loose pieces that sit in here. So we got this thing. I don't know what this does or why it exists, but it sits right here. And all it does is like slightly block airflow into the heater core. Honestly, I think I'm just going to rip that out of there. Let's see what happens for science. And then there's this ring that just kind of snaps in right by the blower motor. So these pieces may have fallen out in case you lose track of them. This one actually has a notch in the bottom of it that lines up with a notch right there. And then this thing goes like that for some reason. As with anything, you want to compare the old and new part to make sure they're visually identical in the sense that they'll fit. Obviously these look different. The original factory heater core is always going to be made out of copper. You can still buy new copper ones, but they're like $100 compared to an aluminum one, which is, I don't know, like $20 to $40. This one is from Four Seasons, and I decided to go with an aluminum one because, well, firstly, they're cheaper, but secondly, because it's one less different element in the cooling system. For whatever reason, Jeep decided that stock, we're going to run the same antifreeze through an aluminum radiator, an iron engine block, and a copper heater core, and that's not going to cause any issues anywhere down the line. So just to eliminate a third element that doesn't necessarily need to exist in the cooling system, I'm going to go with an aluminum heater core. Copper heater cores are better at exchanging heat, but aluminum is, I mean, it's not that much worse. It's not like, oh no, I got an aluminum heater core, my heater only gets up to like 70 degrees. It's like, it's hardly noticeable at all. Anyway, it came with this felt seal, which I assume just goes around the edge of it, so I'm going to put that on real quick. Alright, and there we go. So the pipes are routed in the same configuration. Smaller ones on the bottom. They look like they're the same shape. This is ready to go in. Here's your old and new evaporator core. This is also from Four Seasons, and when it comes to air conditioning parts, you want to make sure to get the same brand of everything, because these fittings are made to different tolerances per brand, which is really stupid. So if you get a Four Seasons evaporator core, which is the brand I recommend, then you also got to get a Four Seasons dryer, and you got to get Four Seasons lines and a condenser and a compressor, whatever. Just get all the same brand so you know everything's going to fit. So this evaporator core came with some new O-rings that I'm not going to use right now. I'm going to install this, but I'm not going to hook it up right away. They ship these vacuum sealed. So that's what these little plates are on here for. There's some little bolts. So you just got to unbolt these little tab things, and then there's rubber seals, and that's to verify that this does in fact hold vacuum. So you know that after you put everything back together, you charge the AC system, it still has a leak somewhere, you know it's not this. Alright, it's time for reassembly. So I'm going to put our new evaporator in here. I got the piece of styrofoam on the bottom. It's a spacer more than anything else. And that's just going to firmly sit nicely right in there. And then we can close this. Here's our new heater core. And these usually don't actually just slot right in. Sometimes you got to bend them a little bit to make them fit right. Obviously don't break the thing. But yeah, you can see this bolt hole here is nowhere near even trying to line up properly. So I don't know, we might have to mess with that a little bit more, but that looks alright. So when we put this thing back on, the main thing you got to be worried about is lining up the top of the blend door to this hole right here. Because this does kind of flop around a little bit, so it can be kind of hard to get that to slot in. So make sure there's no wires or vacuum lines hanging in between the seam, and then I'm going to lower it on here. Also got to line up this little rubber thing, and there are dowel pins. There's one way over here, and there's one on this side, so they can help you line it up. You obviously be very careful with it. This is Chrysler plastic we're talking about. Okay, that's the one. First dry. So obviously don't forget that weird little heater vent door thing that I took out to research what happens if it's not there. And then the ring that sits in front of the blower motor. Both of those things have to be in there before you put the top on. So now I'm going to go around it and visually inspect the whole seam and make sure everything's lined up before we even consider putting bolts back in. I want to make sure the whole thing sits nice and flush, and here it's not. There's a considerable gap right there, so let's find out why. So looking in here, you can see there's a gap in the middle right there. That's a problem. And I bet that problem is because of the blend door not lining up with the hole, like I was telling you about earlier. So I don't think there's any conceivable way I'm going to get this on camera, but what I have done in the past is, so we're going to close this door so we can open this one and hold that open with that, and I'm going to reach my arm in here in this gap and I'm going to try to grab the blend door and shove it into its spot. So this is what my arms are doing right now. It's very, very tight in there. A lot of trial and error. This is the thing that's not lining up with the slot and the roof of the lid. It wants to sit like over here, and it needs to be over here. And that little bit of a difference is what's making the whole lid not go on. So like I said, you don't want to start bolting it down, because that's when stuff breaks. So another idea I had in my effort to line up that blend door is to take off the actuator on the bottom. This is what it looks like. Again, there's just 3 8mm bolts that hold it on. And this way you can grab the bottom of the blend door and actually turn it. So I'm hoping by doing that, I'm going to be able to wiggle it a little bit and get this lid lined up. It needs to slot in like that.
and it is not doing that, so it's sitting like a 1/4 inch off. And obviously, when you tighten the bolts down and put tension on that, the door is not going to be able to open and close properly. So you're going to lose function of the temperature control knob. Alright, I finally got it. It's sealed now. My old tried and tested method of opening this door and reaching my arm in there to move the blend door, that's what did it. And it sucks. Like, I can barely fit my hand in there, but that's the only way I've found that reliably can get that blend door to line up. Okay, so now the same as disassembly, we're going to start with these 2 clips right here, which I think they're supposed to just stay on there, but they never do. Come on. There's 1. There's 2.
Stage 7, reassembly. Don't forget to plug in the brown line for the floor vents, then work your way around the box, installing all 13 essential screws. These only go to 1.6 foot-pounds. I'll have the torque specs on screen with the second number in Newton meters. Snap the blower motor relay and the green connector back in place. Also, don't forget the green line for the recirculate vent.
Look at that. That's bait. I'm going to try to put that screw back in there now. So we've wrapped back around to the clips. All of the screws are on. You can go ahead and plug in the green line to this vacuum diaphragm down here. Snap on these connectors. Route your blower motor wire back over there. And make sure the blend door operates nice and freely. Something like that. Because the blend door actuator is electronic, we can't verify this works until we put everything back together. We can also put this cover back on if yours still has it. The top screws just have slots, and then the bottom screws just screw in. I've got my professional patch job good and ready to go. So after you got the box assembled and all the bolts are in it, we'll put the blower motor in there and the wire for it. Make sure this doesn't get caught up here, because I've seen that happen before too. Plug that in, it goes in this little slot right here. And then I'm going to take our new foam thing. There's a little cutout on the one side for the bolt, and the adhesive stuff sticks to the HVAC box. It's gonna go on there. Yeah. Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. Dang. There we go. And it doesn't, it's ripping now. It doesn't really seem to fit on there exactly like the old one did. It's like missing material up here. Yeah, no, there's a big old hole right there. I'm gonna have to fill with spray foam or some shit. Oh, there we go. It's a little better. Suppose I should have bent the heater core tubes to line up with the foam.
Back in the Jeep, we can raise the box back into place, being careful not to pinch any wires or vacuum lines. You kind of have to press this forward against the sound insulation foam all over the firewall. To line this up, I reach my hand around the front side of it and feel for the evaporator drain tube and align it using that.
There we go. Okay. All of our studs are poking through the firewall, including that one. Yeah, that new foam ought to be okay. It doesn't seal it perfectly, but it's definitely better than cracked and dry rotted factory original stuff. So over here, obviously there's a ton of wires. This goes up the A-pillar for your overhead console stuff. Just make sure none of that's caught, squished, tangled up, crimped, whatever, etc. Make sure this is still hanging down here. Make sure everything's good over here. And then we can go ahead and bolt this thing in.
First, you got to put in the AC dryer and its bracket because remember it shares those two nuts with the HVAC box. I won't be installing a dryer today, so instead I'll put those metal caps and rubber stoppers back in the evaporator, which can otherwise just be thrown away. You can start by putting in all the nuts. These ones are torqued to only 4.5 foot-pounds. Be very careful with them.
You can put on your evaporator drain tube thing as well, but honestly, the 97 Plus one is kind of pathetic. It just drains directly onto the frame rail. In 96 and prior, they actually had a 90-degree bend in this tube. So, there we go. Now I have 96 swapped my evaporator drain tube. This is funny because I don't have AC. Bolt number 5, we're just not going to put that back on. You don't need it. We got the other 4 of them. It'll be fine.
Once 4 of the nuts are snugged down, the evap leak pump is next. The main wire harness goes under its bracket, 3 10mm self-tappers, the connector, the vacuum supply, and the test pipe are all plugged in. The purge valve can also go back on, plug in those lines and its connector.
Another thing on 97s where these connectors are all the same, the blue-white wire with the red-black wire goes to the evap purge valve thing. Green and blue-orange go to the AC this thingy. And if there's another one, it's for the ABS. So at this point, obviously you can plug in your AC lines and your heater hoses. I'm going to do the heater hose later because I have this bypass thing I talked about in the past video. On 97s, make sure to mount your charcoal canister back in place. And that is the engine bay side of things done. So, let's get back to work in here. Before we put the dash back in, you can go ahead and route this wire back up under this little cover here. Make sure no wires are going to get caught when we shove a piece of metal on this bolt. So I just shoved them all back that way. And speaking of these bolts, if these are rusty at all, you should take them out and clean them because these 2 bottom corner bolts are the ground studs for everything electronic in the dash. So if you're having any electrical issues whatsoever, I'm talking like the backlight's not working, maybe even the center switches like the defroster and the rear wiper and the fog lights and the radio, the cluster, I mean everything. Everything that's in the dash grounds on these 2 screws. So go ahead and take them out and clean them up. Once that's done, you can put them back in about this far. And I think we're ready for a dashboard.
The dashboard is just as hard to get in as it is to get out.
Oh boy. kind of a two-person job. Oh man, those big ass connectors are caught in the door. Come on, you assholes. Okay, come on now. There we go. All right. Over the studs on the top, and then it'll hang there. And then, so after you get it hooked on the top studs, literally every single wire and connector in the entire vehicle is going to get jammed somewhere it shouldn't be. So leave it loose for now, and we're going to get all these connect. Like, look at this. I don't even know if that's on frame, but literally everything is going to get caught. So just go over all of it. So there's no reason that green connector can't be plugged in before you just put the dash in. That'll make it easier, one less thing to get caught. And then the radio antenna and all the stuff by the fuse box. Over here, this one really likes to jam itself right there. Yeah. And then these two also like to get caught on everything. Here they did not. So there's a gray and a white box that correspond to a gray and a white slot on here. The passenger airbag wire goes around this way, and that can plug in now. And this is just aftermarket stuff. That's why I've been kind of ignoring it, because a lot of people won't have that. And this is all the steering column wires. This is the brake pedal switch. We can actually put that in right now. And there we go. So our lower dash screw over there is good. This one over here is good. After we verified that there's no wires caught anywhere being pinched or anything, we're going to go along the top and visually inspect, make sure these bolt holes line up, and then we can start putting those top bolts in. But don't tighten any of them down yet, just put them all in. Another thing that can get caught is the A-pillar trim right here. This can get like wedged behind the dash, so make sure you check that on both sides. And I got all the upper bolts in there. I got this lower bracket loosely installed. Now that everything lines up, we can start tightening it all down. With the dash all bolted in, you can plug in the green connector, the radio antenna, and the vacuum harness. Now this connector, I'm pretty sure is plastic on the older years. This seems to be some sort of rubberized material on a 2001. But either way, I've noticed on a 97, you want to be really careful with that because it was extremely brittle. You can plug in and bolt down these 3 bolted connectors. Now, these only plug in the way they're supposed to, so you don't got to worry about putting that in upside down, which I imagine would be pretty catastrophic. I kind of wonder what would happen if you did. Anyway, this one I gotta push the clutch pedal down to fit it in there. For these, you just go until the bolt stops spinning. Like that's plenty tight enough. For the steering column, remember this is turned 180 to the left. I got mine to actually lock. I don't know how to consistently replicate that, but again, just make sure you don't turn this at all. If you have a tilt wheel, which I do not, you want to make sure that it's in the highest position because it makes this bracket so much easier to line up. I'm just going to shove it on the back bolts, and then it should, yeah, just go up like that. Nice and easy. As for the shaft, this is extremely difficult to record, but because the steering shaft is collapsible, you can just pull it out and slide it onto the steering column. If you remove the steering column with this still attached to it, you can pull the shaft out of itself because it's a collapsible steering shaft. As you can see, it just separated. That's not a big deal. All you got to do is slide it back on there. But that can be, you can get it backwards. You can do it 180 off. So make sure not to rotate any of this. And this I can't do this with the camera and everything. Or can I? All right, I got it. So when it's lined up, it should just slide right on there with no issues. Like, don't try to force it. Because of the splines, and there's actually a space for the bolt, it's only going to go on exactly how it should. Like, it can only go on one way, so don't try to force that. With the column all bolted down, should only have one remaining wire harness, and this is going to go around the back side like that. This is your big ass ignition switch connector. What else we got here? This also goes into this thing. This is for skim, so a lot of XJs are just not going to use this. This is for the automatic shift lock cable. Mine's a manual, so I'm not going to use that. What do we got here? The cruise control and the horn and clock spring stuff. This is the turn signal lever and the hazards and the brights and all that. And on this side we just got the wiper control. And I think that's all of them. Then you can put on the steering column trim with the 3 bolts on the underside of it here. The 3 screws, they look like this. And at this point, the Jeep is assembled enough to drive, assuming you put the key back in for the 97 columns.
The top trim comes next. That just snaps in across the board. Then the cluster trim.
Plug in my switches on this panel here.
Which goes over the headlight switch and snaps in. Then you got 4 screws and the radio bezel. Remember your rear seat heater vent tube, then put the center console in with its 4 screws. And don't forget the backlights under the shifter bezels.
The skeeters are starting to come out. I gotta call it a night. Future Waemid, can you show the audience how to assemble the rest of the interior? Don't worry about it, past Waemid, I got you. So all that's really left is the kick panel trim on both sides and the knee blocker here. We got 2 screws on the metal thing. This rubber seal, I guess, has like a zipper and it sits in itself like that. And then we can put the plastic trim on like that. And then there's 3 screws along the bottom. That's the interior, all back together, nice and neat and orderly. I got some heater hoses on here. These are off like a WJ or something, so they don't really fit how they should. Wouldn't recommend that. They're just what I had laying around. So now we got a spill-proof funnel going over there. I'm gonna reconnect this battery. We're gonna start this son of a bitch up. My hood light. There we go. Well, before I even started it, I noticed an issue. Yeah, we're gonna need to fix that. Alright, I took the hose off, cleaned up that fitting with a Scotch-Brite pad, and replaced this clamp style hose with one of these worm gear ones. And it does not appear to be leaking anymore, so I think we are clear for startup. Wisconsin's like, hey, this guy's replacing a heater core, we better make it rain for no reason out of nowhere. And now's the part where we see if all of my hard work paid off. Alright. Started on the first try after we had all that stuff taken out. That's a good sign. The belt squealed because there's coolant on it. I might have to tighten that down a little bit, but we're just going to let it idle, get up to operating temperature, get this coolant flowing through here. When you take off the heater hoses and get the heater core out, you only lose like maybe a quart of coolant. It's probably not worth doing this, but you know, I haven't had any hoses on it for a long time, and I don't know, we'll see. It'll make it happy. Damn, look at this dude. He doesn't like the fact that we're fixing shit. So the AC stuff I might do later if I can be convinced to put AC back in the Jeep. I never use it. So like, it didn't work and I never use it, so I just ripped everything out. Like, I don't have a compressor or a condenser or any of the lines or anything. But I feel like the air conditioning system could very well be its own video. Whenever you unplug any AC line, you have to replace the O-rings. So do that if you didn't. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm gonna run it like this until further notice. Okay. So, I haven't even run the heater yet. What are we sitting at, like 80 something ambient temperature? Okay, I heard the blend door work. Turn this heater on. Well, it sucks. It doesn't do anything. The engine's right at operating temperature. So I decided to just go drive it, and now it's 500 million degrees in here. 150 coming out of the vents. That's what I should expect. I don't know why it's doing that now that I'm driving, when the engine's colder than it was during idle, but it works. I got a theory. So at idle speed, the water pump is spinning slower, so it's not circulating any coolant. And now that the engine's chilling at 2,000 RPM, we're forcing all sorts of coolant through that heater core, so now it's warm. That's probably all it was. And yeah, I'm sweating in here. It is a balmy 77 degrees today. People in Wisconsin are hiding indoors with the AC cranked to 16 degrees. It's like a sauna in here, dude. I love this. This is going to be so nice in the winter. Oh yeah. Speaking of winter, do not wait to do this job until it's cold. Okay? This job sucks when it's cold. When you're freezing your ass off and you're reaching all over the dash and all these tight cavities trying to unplug connectors and reach bolts you can't see. That sucks when it's freezing to death outside. But when it's warm, shit. This only took me like 5 hours. Like, this is a weekend project. Alright, I've finished my lovely test drive. Verified everything works. By everything, I mean, you want to go through all the settings. You want to make sure the fan works on all speeds. You want to make sure all the vents work when you set them to the correct thing on here to make sure all your vacuum stuff is on. You want to make sure the blend door works. Hear the blend door actuating, and obviously now it's set to cold air, so there's going to be cold air coming out of the vents instead of blazing hot. I also still don't have this thing in there, so it doesn't appear to do anything. I'm not saying take it out. I just wanted to see what would happen if I did, and so far nothing seems to have happened. Like, I don't hear anything rattling around in there. The heater and AC, obviously, they work as intended. All the vents work. Airflow is good. I have no idea what this thing does. You should put it back in because, I mean, they don't put things in cars for no reason.
It does something, I just don't know what. The side vents are always colder than the main vents. That's almost 160 degrees. That is awesome. Yeah, that one's only at like 135 though. So that's normal. Don't get concerned about that. Let's see what these ones are at. 113, yeah. And then what about the floor vents? 135, yeah. So they all work. Okay, I've been idling here for 10 minutes. I've had it on recirc. Look at that, 180 degrees out of the vents. I'm gonna suffocate and die from heat stroke, bro. This is amazing. This is everything I've ever dreamed of. Holy Christ. Yeah, look at that, dude. Oh, dude, I'm never gonna want to get out of this thing in the winter, man. 190 degrees. Where's my forehead at? 111. Yeah, I'm actively dying. This is actually hurting my hands. Like if I hold my hand too close to the heater vent, it's actually burning me. I love this. But 190 seems to be about as high as it'll go, which makes sense, because that's about what the thermostat in the engine runs at. So this is about as much heat as you're ever going to get out of one of these things. What does it say on a maximum 191? All right, for liability reasons. Oh, Jesus, dude. Like my whole body is drenched in sweat right now. That is, I'm cold. It's 80 degrees outside, I'm cold. Just like Florida. So after you verify the heater works, you can bring it back to the shop or whatever and recharge your AC. Obviously, make sure all that works too. But other than that, I think you are good to go. So thank you for watching my comprehensive guide on how to replace the heater core on a 9701 Jeep Cherokee. You can handle it. I know it looks like a lot. It's a big project, but you can do it reasonably in a weekend.